she was very excited at the prospect of marrying William. Maria was last seen leaving her cottage and heading towards the Red Barn that evening. William then met Maria at the Red Barn and was gone for some time, several days up to weeks. Now William eventually came back to Polstead, and people began to question where Maria was, as she did not come back with William. William told people that Maria and he had gotten married in Ipswich, and that she was still in Ipswich, since some of his friends and family members were rather unhappy about his marriage to Maria, and he insinuated that these people did not like Maria. William told people that it was for Maria's safety, that he was not planning on bringing her back to Polstead quite yet. William, however, continued to stay in Polstead, and people began to question him more and more. William eventually felt so much pressure that he, too, decided to leave Polstead for a second time. After leaving Polstead, William wrote several letters to Maria's family, claiming that they ended up moving and living on the Isle of Wight, and that they were happily married there. Maria's family was rather concerned, as they had not heard directly from Maria, but William claimed that Maria had fallen ill at various points. Another time, William claimed that Maria had hurt her hand. And then William eventually told Maria's family that she had written a letter, if not several letters, to her family. However, it must have gotten lost in the post. Maria's family was beginning to grow more and more concerned, as it had been almost a year since they had last seen Maria. eventually found that he was not living in Ipswich or on the Isle of Wight, but that he was back in London. The authorities tracked him down to a part of London called Brentford, and he was living there helping to run a boarding house for women with a new wife who was a woman named Mary Moore. Now it seems that William had met Mary after placing a Lonely Hearts ad in the newspaper. William had placed 3 different ads in 3 different papers and had received quite a few replies to his advertisement, and William eventually chose to settle down with Mary. When the authorities found William, he claimed that he did not know who Maria was, and he had no involvement in her death. However, the authorities found that William was in charge of several different letters, and these letters revealed that the authorities back in Polstead had found Maria's remains. The police also found a few pistols along with a French passport, and this indicated that William was aware of Maria's remains being found, and he was possibly preparing and trying to flee. Now William was eventually put on trial for Maria's murder, but once again he claimed that he had nothing to do with it. William said that he and Maria had been in the Red Barn when they began to argue, and eventually William left. When he left, he claims that he heard a single shot, and after he returned to the barn, he found Maria deceased. The prosecution claimed that William never wanted to marry Maria, and that he wanted to get rid of her, as she knew of several crimes that he had committed, so he feared if he broke up with her, he would get in trouble with the police. William was convicted of Maria's death, and a few days after his conviction, William confessed that he had shot Maria at the Red Barn. He didn't really provide a good excuse as to why, though, other than they were arguing. On August the 11th, in the year 1828, William was hanged for his crimes. Now, after the trial and William's execution, it began to circulate that Maria's stepmother, Anne, was possibly involved in a relationship with William. Now remember, Anne was only 1 year older than Maria, and it was suggested that she was possibly